Hey guys, how are all of you doing? Hope fine, and yes, this is the next part of Game of Shadow in Naruto world. Where I am in the Naruto world. I have a name that isn't mine and I have a really nerfed version of the gamer. Is that all? Am I forgetting something? Right, inventory. At that I received yet another disappointment. Let's start without any delay. What did you expect to happen, Sasori? IG asked, biting his rations. He'd been eating ever since his fight with Kakuzu ended, and for good reason. His body needed sustenance and matter to regenerate. So, he was giving it exactly that. His wound may have closed, but World Ender was still working on his insides. Right at that moment, he could barely function, and that was mainly due to chakra and senjutsu shenanigans rather than because of his own body. IG was sure that if he were back in his original world he'd be very much agonizing. Then again, back there Kakuzu's attack would have killed him. Although, it wouldn't have been possible at all. Pull yourself together, IG Hakai told him softly, making IG shake his head. No answer, huh? He said, focusing his attention on the container that housed the remaining humanity of Sasori of the Red Sand. Tracking him had been a bit of a hassle, what with him switching puppets to try and get away. It hadn't been that bad though. Now with time to get senjutsu going, that alone would have made the search easy. Not to mention, he's a bit dumb, right? Shirakumo asked curiously from his shoulder, and he saw a few of the hunter spiders around twitch in response. Why put himself there? Like that? The spider princess added. Because. Yeah, he was dumb, IG ultimately agreed. He could have explained all the stuff behind that, but really, he couldn't care less at the moment. So, he left it at that. No need to give depth to such a thing, he supposed. There was also the fact that he was very annoyed with Sasori. At least this mission is definitely over, he mused out loud with a weary sigh. Quest complete, defeat Haiden and Kakuzu. Reward. +2 to all stats. Plus perk updated, Bloodhound. Plus perk updated, Resilience. Plus title updated, The Weaver. Okay then, he thought, unable to even feel happy with the screen. He just wanted to. IG sighed, deciding to get on with it and check everything. He was likely to forget if he left it for later, considering how scrambled his mind felt. Bloodhound. The user's stats are increased by 15% when facing a bleeding foe. All stats instead of just dexterity, huh? That's interesting. Resilience, intermediate. The user recovers from injuries moderately faster than normal. What happened here? I think it wasn't intermediate before. He wondered for a moment. It had been a while since he'd given the skill much thought. Especially since its effect was just passive and always there. It didn't require much consideration from his part, really. The Weaver. Increases stats when fighting alongside members of the Spider Clan by 20%. Increases stats when fighting with New Ivory by 35%. Increases the effects of Bloodlust when using threads by 30%. Increases the effects of thread-based techniques by 30%. Increases the effects of lightning release techniques by 10%. Increases the effects of fire release techniques by 5%. Well, this is certainly something. Pretty sure most percentages got a little boost, and then there's the jutsu. It's not much, but certainly good, he mused, deflating wearily as he dismissed all the screens. He'd check his status screen later. It was just a few stats added, honestly. Are you okay, IG? Shirakumo asked, receiving an echo that she couldn't hear from Sachigumo. The boy in question, though, simply gave her a slightly forced smile. I am just feeling really tired, he replied, taking another bite of his meal. God, I need a break. Maybe when you get back. Maybe, he agreed, even though he didn't believe so. There were still 2 pairs of Akatsuki members to deal with. Zetsu was out there too. There was Obito. There were several things to keep IG busy for the moment, sadly. There was also the fact that the enemies left out there were the most difficult or unknown. IG? Shirakumo asked, her tone still concerned as she poked him on the cheek. It's nothing, he waved off. Thanks for the help, everyone, he called, getting a series of responses before most of the spiders disappeared in a puff of smoke. You staying around, Shira-chan? Still calling me that, huh? The spider princess replied with a huff. Of course, and that's unlikely to change, he told her with a more honest but still tired smile. How are things going back home? Your mother is still insisting on genjutsu training. Yes. Shirakumo cried out with a suffering sigh. She'll barely let me train anything else, it's awful. Not everything can be solved by throwing poison around, sadly, IG commented with a shrug that had his shoulder rider grumbling. Have you gotten bigger? Is that something you should be asking a lady? The spider asked back with a mock-offended tone. He could hear the humor in her voice though. I'm a growing spider, you know. Of course I'm getting bigger. Ha, that's nice. You'll be as big as your mother in no time, I bet, he mused, considering that it was something he hadn't considered. Of course the spider would get bigger as time passed. Gamekichi did too, even if it was only in between time skips that weren't shown. It was still a weird thing to notice. You think? Yeah, I do, he said, setting a foot over the canister that contained Sasori and settling with just looking around. With a small smile still in place, IG summoned a clone and sent it away towards his team. He'd take a little break where he was, maybe draw the sight before him with the small stream of water running through the forest, the trees and some rather beautiful wildflowers around. It was nice, and it was, perhaps more importantly, calm. Silence was something that was getting rarer and rarer in his life. IG? Shirakumo whispered, seemingly noticing the change in the situation. Say, Shira-chan, he started, getting yet another huff from the now not so little spider. I'm gonna draw for a bit, do you want to pose? No, maybe some other time, she replied, slightly caught off guard. There was a moment of silence as IG pulled out a notebook from a storage seal before pausing. This is just the height I need, he mused, noticing that his leg was at the perfect spot for him to draw on. Thanks for that, Sasori, he added with a slight smirk. What are you going to do to him? Shirakumo asked hesitantly. Why she was nervous, IG didn't know. Well, I'll just drop him at the T&D department, he waved off. Are you gonna stay shirtless? She continued, and that question made him pause. Right, I did that. Not that there was much left before, he thought, looking down. Right, thanks for pointing that out, Shira-chan, he mumbled, pulling a storage seal. Don't mention it, the spider said, all but beaming at him. IG, meanwhile, felt his face twitch as he considered taking a second set of clothes that he had stored. His body was still regenerating, and one of the reasons he'd chosen to take off the most damaged part of his outfit was that it felt awfully restraining while he struggled to recover from his wounds. Thus, he decided on a different piece of clothing. taking out a coat that he carried around just in case. It was, funnily enough, very similar to the one he'd used for his original ninja outfit, back when he'd just become a genin. Putting it on, he was still practically shirtless, with nothing under it, but it felt free enough not to bother him while World Ender continued working. With that out of the way, he focused on his notebook. Oh. It was almost reluctantly that IG found himself walking back to his team, which was why he didn't just flicker or tree hop there. Instead, he took the scenic route, as it were. Even if it meant going back home with their mission finished, it also meant following a now almost usual routine. Go on a mission. Almost die. Survive. Come back. Rinse and repeat. IG was growing tired of this. Tired of training. Tired of fighting. Tired of almost being on the verge of the void. Tired of being at peace knowing that it was merely temporary. He was tired of it all. And worse still, he couldn't stop. What would happen if he stopped? His friends were stronger than their canon counterparts, in some aspects at the very least. That didn't mean they would be able to deal with the threats of the future though. There was nothing saying that things wouldn't go to hell as soon as he took himself out of the picture. Just a bit more, IG Hakai reassured. Just a few more fights and it'll be done. She was right, but it didn't help nearly as much as he thought it should. Took your time, fearless leader. Taeya greeted, being the first to notice his arrival. She sounded subdued, but still very much herself. That was good. He might have forgotten himself a little when he'd dropped Kakuzu before going after Sasori. New fashion choice. You'll distract the bimbos, you know. The redhead asked, getting scandalized bristling from both blondes in the team. Sad, he replied blandly. I wanted to distract you. Was Taeya's disgruntled response, clearly caught off guard. Man, can you draw a picture of that face? I want it saved for the ages, Jirobo asked, smirking, if only slightly. I guess IG answered with a shrug. Everything okay, IG? Tamrai mumbled concernedly as she approached him, albeit hesitantly. I'm fine, he said, but obviously nobody bought it. Yuki chose that moment to approach him and rub her head against his leg. Closing his eyes, he slowly breathed out. Nothing too bad, he amended, placing a hand on the dog's head. So, everyone's ready. Looking around, it seemed to be the case. Jirobo was standing next to the incapacitated Haiden and Kakuzu, ready to pick them up. IG was glad for that being taken care of. He didn't even want to see the pair if he didn't absolutely have to. Thus, he turned away immediately after checking. Everyone else was relaxing, although it looked more like waiting than actually just messing around. That was good, IG supposed, taking another ration from his storage seal and opening it. Starting to eat once more, he found his attention focusing on the person that seemed to want it the least. Fu. As the girl gave him a very hesitant, slightly scared smile, IG tilted his head. Then something occurred to him. Kabuto, he called, making the medic stand straight. Is there any way to store those two in a seal? Not without killing them, he said. And I'd say that they could be, temporarily like that, but with these two special conditions, I doubt that's doable. It's a risky process anyway. I see, IG mumbled, considering what he wanted to do and the problem the two Akatsuki members represented. Then a smile formed on his face. Shirakumo, do you think the spiders could keep these two safely contained? Maybe Sasori too? He asked, making the spider on his shoulder shift a little as she considered the question for a second. "Sure, I'll have to ask Mum, but there shouldn't be a problem," the small white spider replied, making him nod. "Be right back." And with his summons gone and the situation somewhat, maybe resolved, he returned to his plans. Plans that needed some help from the recent, if temporary, addition to their little team. The Seven-Tails Jinchuriki didn't look any more relaxed than she did before, but he didn't much care for that at the moment. "Do you know any nice sights around?" he asked, making the girl, and everyone else too, blink. "I feel like sightseeing a little. Might just sit around and draw a bit, or something. I want a little vacation," he explained, before taking another bite of his rations. He tried taking a deep breath in, but while it didn't hurt anymore, it still felt very strange. "Ah. I know one or two," the girl replied, looking very confused. "Are you sure we shouldn't just go straight to Konoha?" Humaiji hummed, crouching down next to Yuki and giving her a thorough petting. "Nah. So, about those sights?" Afu started, looking around for help and getting only shrugs from all of them. "There's one not too far from here, if you want to go right now," she offered. Not yet," Ig decided, sitting on the ground and letting Yuki rest her head on his lap. "Take a moment to rest, everyone. I'm sure everyone's tired after the battle. You can take the opportunity to tell me how it went with Hayden." "Can we just not?" Taeya asked, groaning and making Ig raise an eyebrow as everyone else seemed to have similar reactions. That was entirely too annoying. "God, I'm glad we destroyed that weapon." Indeed, Jirobo agreed with her, for once, grimacing in turn with the redhead. "Well, that's okay," Ig mumbled, this time being his turn to be confused. "Guess we can leave that report for later." "Or never," Taeya muttered under her breath. "So?" the leader prompted. "What exactly would you like to see?" Fu offered with a nervous smile. At least she didn't look terrified anymore though. Ig would count that as a victory, he supposed. "Well. Oh. Nice sight," Ig mused, as he continued drawing what was in front of him. A particularly nice spot on the cliff that went through a side of Takegakyo. The place was far away from the village, of course, but in the distance, one could see the waterfall that named it. It was barely distinguishable, but it added nicely to the picture. Thus, he continued adding to the notebook where he'd drawn sights from Iwagakyo. The calm valley before them joining the imponent mountains and harsh extensions of rock. Maybe he'd look for a smaller waterfall nearby to add to that. There were a few spread all over the cliff, after all. Maybe you could add these sights to the mindscape, Kij suggested, and Ig had to pause at the idea. "That's actually a good idea," Hakai commented, echoing his thoughts. "Why do you sound surprised?" the original Orochimaru look-alike asked. "Oi!" he protested when he was only met with silence. Tuning out a mocking remark from Hakai, Ig focused on the outside world once more. On what he could see and what he could hear. Taeya's eerie but beautiful music reached his ears from where she'd sat not so far away. The rest of the group sat around doing their own thing. Yuki, for example, had taken a break from keeping him company and was now resting her head on Kabuto's lap. Ig was fine with that. He'd gotten a little better after moving and having something to take his mind away from things. Besides, Shirakumo was still with him after she'd delivered the message from her mother and the prisoners had been taken to the spider domain. Currently, the white arachnid was hanging from a thread over his notebook, slowly rotating. Yujito he called them, having picked up on something that nearly ruined his mood. Stop it, he said calmly, when the woman went to say something. Probably to lie through her teeth about not having been fishing for information from Fu, he activated bloodlust. You will stop, or I'll kick you back to Kumo. You are being allowed to be here. Don't think you are indispensable. Bimbos, honestly, Taeya muttered with an illusion as she started playing once again. Sometimes, Taeya, sometimes it feels like you are right about things, IG commented with a shake of his head. What a world we live in. Oi, what's that supposed to mean? The redhead protested. I'm always right. Sure you are, he replied blandly, as he focused back on his notebook. Still, he kept an eye on Yujito and Fu. There was silence on that front now, which he was fine with. Well, if it weren't for the fact that it clearly made the ex-Takinin uncomfortable. That's when a saving grace appeared in the shape of Jirobo approaching the two and speaking to the younger girl. Good. Remind me to do something nice for him, IG thought. Sure, Hakai agreed absently. Thus, his pencil continued moving over the page as his mind all but drifted off to the tune of Taeya's flute. Shutting down his own thoughts became extremely easy. He didn't want to think too hard about it, but he appreciated that fact. With some luck, his team would keep an eye out for him, because at that moment, he couldn't be bothered. Soon, not even the sights ahead held his attention as his mind took him somewhere else. What his thoughts came up with was a dream world, a place where Akatsuki was out and there was no risk of Madara and Kaguya. A world of peace where he could just rest and do whatever. What would happen then? IG was surprised to find that he'd prefer to stay away from the battlefield if he could. Staying at Konoha working behind a desk sounded like an absolute perfect future, funnily enough. Maybe not drowning in it, but having easy and definitely not too stressful work waiting for him instead of deadly battles that decided the fate of the world sounded nice. Maybe you can revisit that idea of working at a restaurant. Kij pointed out, and IG could almost see a smirk on his face. Now there's an idea, IG agreed with a grin of his own. Didn't expect that from you though. Eh? Staying in one place and studying, improving, researching, sounds good to me, the man said absently. Maybe we can see about getting you and Hakai actual bodies, IG mused distractedly. I'm sure I can tweak the shadow clone technique in some way, probably. We'd appreciate that, IG Hakai told him, although her tone sounded strange. He couldn't quite place it, but surely they'd tell him if something was going on. So, he continued his daydreaming. Kij was onto something. Having a restaurant to work at occasionally sounded pretty good. Helping his village by just existing and maybe doing some decision-making and paperwork for it too. That sounded easy and calm. A nice change from what his life had been ever since he graduated. How do people in this world manage? IG had to wonder. He was barely into his ninja career and he was already so very done with it all. How long has it been? 2 years. He wasn't even sure anymore. The point was, he had barely been a ninja for that long and he was already fucking tired of it. Sure, his career was hardly normal and he knew it, but still. Most prodigies and geniuses aren't the picture of sanity for a reason, Hakai pointed out, and IG had to admit she had a point there. Suddenly some things about the world made entirely too much sense. God, I should really have just gone civilian, he lamented. Never too late for that, huh? Kij asked casually. Granted, we have a few crazies to take care of beforehand. One can only hope, Kijiji thought, sighing and looking at the finished drawing before him, back in the real world. Passing the page, he wondered what he would draw next. One can only hope. Oh. Everything is under control, right? Tamrai asked for the 100th time, not that Ig could blame her. Besides, her worrying meant he could just relax, so that was good in his books. Yes, it is, Shirakumo answered, and while she couldn't do so, Ig knew she would have rolled her eyes at the sand ninja. They were already subdued. We have specialists with venom that can keep them out for as long as we need to. Nothing will happen. Even if they wake up, they'll be too weak to do anything at all. You are paraphrasing your mother, aren't you? Ig asked, quite sure that he was right on the money. Of course not, Shirakumo denied, in a way that told him he was right. He chuckled to himself as he continued walking. Really, sometimes she was just too cute for her own good. I have to say, I'm enjoying this, Jirobo commented with an expression that mirrored Ig's own. He was clearly doing just as he said, which the leader was happy about. Taking the slow and long way back to Konoha was a personal decision, but he'd have been a little quicker if his team was boring themselves out of their minds. Fortunately, it wasn't the case. Even Yujito, who seemed to be the most dedicated to following missions and such, didn't say anything. Granted, it was probably because she was actually fulfilling a mission of information gathering for her people regardless of what they did. Ig didn't care much about that anymore. He stopped her from poking Fu too much because the girl deserved better than to be interrogated all the time, especially if she didn't even know it was happening. At least after just getting out of the situation she had. I never got to explore like this, the aforementioned girl mused from next to him. I didn't remember these places being as beautiful as they are. It's quite the change, when you are just passing by and when you actually pay attention, Ig said, a slight smile on his face as his eyes moved to the side and followed the stream they were traveling by. His head, meanwhile, moved along with the music of Teiya's flute. The redhead seemed to have decided to go with a more lively song. As he gave the tune a little more attention, it added a bounce to his step. Nice song, he commented, his grin widening the smallest bit. She's nice when she is. Fu started, before trailing off as she struggled to come with a word. Not talking. Ig finished, chuckling at the girl's slightly panicked expression. You are not wrong, he added. Not wrong at all, Kabuto said, joining the laughter together with Jirobo. Are you still doing fine, by the way? The medic asked, turning his eyes towards Ig, who nodded. I'm fine. You got that antidote right, it seems, he answered. Sasori had added a little gift to that blade he used to draw Ig's blood. The thing had even managed to add 2 more levels to his poison resistance, which was no small feat. After all, the skill was quite advanced already. Poison resistance LVL 39. Reduces the effectiveness of poisons by 39%. Regardless, Kabuto had always kept an eye on the things Sasori was given to tinker poison-wise, that and whatever the puppet master could possibly get his hands on by himself. Thus, he had quite a few antidotes at the ready. None that had helped with this particular one, but World Ender had given the medic time to make one. Let me know if there's anything of note, Kabuto said firmly. Ig was pretty sure that the ex-spy was worried he'd think he'd betrayed them too. After all, Kabuto had been the one to suggest recruiting Sasori. Ig and Hakai didn't think that was the case though. Kij was a little less sure, but overall they'd decided that it was unlikely enough to give him the benefit of the doubt. They'd keep an eye on him though, just in case. Sure, I'll do that. For the moment, relax, will you? That's the whole point of us doing this, IG told him. It's weird, you know. I'm almost expecting wires or a sword or something to come flying at me, Kabuto commented wryly, drawing a laugh from the leader. I know what you mean, Tamrai agreed with a chuckle. It's been a while since we had so much time without training. Even when we were out on missions, she added. It's nice, but I guess I got used to the training. Well, you can train by yourselves, if you want to, IG told them with a shrug. I think I won't for a while. I can watch and give you pointers if you want them though. That'd be appreciated, Gyrobo nodded, and that was that from him. He was a simple man, IG had found. It was a nice thing, really, considering how overcomplicated everything seemed to be. I don't know, I'm quite enjoying the break, Taeyang mused through her sound illusions. I wouldn't say no to some help tinkering with genjutsu though. We can do whenever. I'm just tired. As long as I don't have to put much effort into it, I'm game, IG shrugged before bringing a hand up. Wires followed it in the air as he started shaping them into things, mimicking a wildflower he'd see on the ground, a particularly pretty rock, trees, birds, anything that caught his eye even for a moment. So, modifying and possibly making genjutsu doesn't require effort? Yujito asked with disbelief in her voice. Jutsu creation has become easy with time, he answered, grinning widely. He knew how ridiculous that sounded, but it was the truth. Maybe it was the system, maybe he was just naturally talented at that, maybe it was something else. Regardless, it was a welcome thing, that was for sure. If only because it had given him the possibility of making his biggest trump card so far. It was a matter of time before he'd have to use it too. Shaking his head, he focused back on what he was doing. There would be a time to worry about those things, but that time wasn't then. He just wanted a bit of peace and quiet. Actual rest instead of just more training with a few things sprinkled in between, that's what he needed. For however long he managed to get it, he'd enjoy it. IG was, at that moment, watching his teammates spar against each other. He wasn't paying too much attention to that though. After all, he'd been working with them for a while now. By that point, he'd given them as much advice as he could, really. From there, it was a matter of them finding the different things to work on together, mostly. There was also the fact that something else had him slightly distracted too. Fuinjutsu LVL5 improves the quality of seals drawn by 5%. Improves the quality of modified seals drawn by 2.5%. Fuck, this is slow, he cursed in his mind, grimacing. He'd been working on that ever since he came back to Konoha after the Iwa mission. Not a terribly long time, for sure, but this had to be one of the slowest skills to level he'd come across so far. Made even worse by the fact that he had most of the clones he could possibly make working on that as much as he could. I should have started working on this sooner, he lamented. Then again, he'd always had other things to work on, and he hadn't had the shadow clone technique for that long. Gotta ask Naruto for classes or something, IG mused. Although, he didn't have high hopes of that working. Seals came naturally to his blonde brother, and that might make it impossible for him to really teach them, at least to those that didn't share the innate understanding that he had of the art. You are lowering your guard, Taeya, he called, noting that the genjutsu user was lagging down on her movement, as she usually did. Not that he blamed her, playing music and jumping around couldn't be very comfortable or easy. However, that could get her killed out there, and he couldn't have that. I know you love the wind, Tamrai, but you gotta work on your earth release more, he added. In hindsight, maybe there was much to be told to his teammates still. Despite that, IG felt his eyelids heavy. He didn't have it in him to care overly much for this training session, so it bored him easily. It was something that was happening more and more. He felt so done with everything. He just wanted to lie down on the ground and sleep for days. Unfortunately, he couldn't do that. "You are going back to the mindscape?" Shirakumo asked, having learned to read him over the time they'd started spending together lately. It wasn't a difficult guess, he supposed. When his weariness started to get the better of him, IG would dive into his own mind, spend some time relaxing in a place that held no dangers and only friendly faces. Play something with the twins or pamper Sachi. Not yet was his response, however. His hand fell on Yuki's head, which was resting on his lap. "How's your training going?" he asked the spider on his shoulder curiously. "It's, going," she replied uneasily. "That bad, huh?" "Genjutsu is evil," was all the not-so-little arachnid answered with, making him chuckle. "You could talk with Teiya, maybe she can help you with that," he suggested, more because he'd been unable to help Shirakumo progress much faster after trying to help the little spider. He wasn't a genjutsu specialist though. Hell, he hadn't used illusions much in a while, actually, besides the void genjutsu, that is. Something to keep in mind, he mused. "I was considering that myself," Hakai commented from his mindscape. He supposed that did fit her style rather well, actually. He'd need all the tools he had available for his future fights. Of that he had little doubt. Even then, it was unlikely to be enough, but there wasn't much he could do anymore. He was already working on too many things. He couldn't very well add more and expect it to help. He could only work on so many things before it started being inefficient. Even with clones, he just didn't have enough time in his days. "You are going away again," Shirakumo told him, making him smile wryly at her. "Sorry," he apologized, sighing. "It's fine," she said, understandingly. "Everything is under control with the prisoners," she continued then in an obvious attempt to keep his mind from spiraling again. He appreciated it though, so he just relaxed, leaned back against the tree behind him and listened to her talk. "And the spiders you asked to keep an eye on things report no trouble, either in Suna or in Konoha." "What about Taki?" IG asked, his eyes half closed. Falling asleep wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, he supposed. First though, he made a clone, just in case. Looking at it though, he saw why everyone shot him concerned looks from time to time. He looked like another person. His skin was paler than usual, his hair even more of a disaster, and his eyes had bags under them. He seemed like a muted version of himself. He's turned his gaze away from the clone. "Well, they've certainly noticed that their greatest asset disappeared," Shirakumo commented dryly. "They are searching all over the place, and anyone that looks remotely important is understandably angry. They still don't know who did it though." "Not surprising," IG mumbled, only half hearing. "I suppose. It's a little disappointing, I guess. Although, it's not like you aren't good enough to pull that off," Shirakumo said. "Thanks for the reluctant compliment." "Idiot," she grumbled, although she didn't seem to mean it, as usual. "Will we be going sightseeing again later today?" I think I'd prefer to just stay here and draw," IG replied, before continuing. "We can do that tomorrow though. I know you like that." "There are nice viewings around here," the spider mumbled. "It's not like you have to explain yourself, Shira-chan," he reassured her with a weak chuckle as his eyes closed. "I like just walking around too." Sleep well, Ig Shirakumo whispered to him, and he'd have replied if his mind hadn't drifted off before he could. Oh. Fu. She sat next to Ig one day. The girl hummed quietly along with the song that Teiya was playing. Her legs swung beneath them under the tree branch, somewhere between a lazy motion and a content one. Her eyes, meanwhile, continued taking in the sight before them, yet another one she'd guided the team to. Following Ig that day was proving to be a great decision. Fu had already enjoyed herself far more than she had in, she didn't even know how long. Even if Konoha ended up being the same as Taki once she actually reached the place, the decision was already worth it just for the break she finally got, short as it may be. Not that she expected things to go that way, really. Over the time she'd been traveling with the team, she liked to think she'd started to get to know them at least a little. Ig didn't seem like the kind of person that would lead her to a place like that. Or so Fu hoped, at least. Regardless of all that, she focused on the present. She expected it to be quite a while before she ever came close to looking at the sights around Taki. After all, even if Konoha bought her decision to just join them, they might be reluctant to send her to the place much less by herself. She got that, but it'd be sad. For all that she hated Taki itself, the surrounding area had some beautiful places. Places that she might not get to see. Although Ig was drawing everything. Maybe she could ask for copies of those. She didn't think he'd tell her no for something so simple. Then again, making those pictures couldn't be easy, especially with how good he was. Still, she had to try. She'd do that, eventually, probably. Ig Sato was scary after all. Nice, because he'd taken her out of Taki, but also terrifying. He'd demonstrated it to her without even having to show her his full power. She remembered, to the last detail, looking at him back then, with a hole on his side, blood dripping down his face and the oppressing feeling of his killing intent. And he kept on going, hunting down Sasori of the Red Sand like he was a silly little genin. He didn't even take that much of a break once the whole shit show was over. No, the man that had rescued her was no normal one, that was for sure. She was surprisingly fine with that though. As much as Ig had terrified her back then, she'd soon realized that she had nothing to worry about. That is, unless she messed up big time. Something that she had no intention of doing, at all. That would spell her doom, and she was rather curious to see if life had finally dealt her a good hand. "You seem happy," Ig asked her, seemingly having decided to take a break from drawing. He was looking better than he did after the fight, but that wasn't saying much. He still looked at the brink of passing out from exhaustion and his mood could drop at the slightest of things. The team was being very careful to avoid such things and Fu. Well, she was used to having to be careful with what she said. She agreed easily, smiling widely at him. That got her a slight, weary one from him, but that was a win in her books. It's just so nice to be able to see all this. And not have to worry about my superiors getting angry. Well, she did have to worry about Ig not getting angry, of course. However, he was a lot more reasonable than her superiors. Honestly, as long as she didn't purposely decide to annoy him, then she was sure she would be fine. That mindset had worked well for her so far, at least. "Well, I'm glad you are enjoying yourself," Ig commented, giving his notebook a passing glance, as if considering whether to go back to drawing. "You sat next to me though," he pointed out, turning back to her as she tilted her head. Had that been a mistake? She didn't think so, but then again, people could get angry at the weirdest of stuff. You've never sat so close to me by yourself. I'd go as far as saying that you've been sort of avoiding me, which would be understandable, I guess, he added, grimacing slightly. I was just assessing the situation, Fu explained with a wry smile. Making sure that you weren't mean, she clarified, just in case, earning a chuckle from IG. And you aren't, so there's nothing to worry about. If all things were that simple, IG mumbled, but he was smiling, so Fu probably hadn't screwed up just yet. Victory. You've been looking at me drawing a whole lot, he pointed out then, and she chuckled awkwardly. Anything I should know? I just was wondering if I could have some. To remember this place, she explained hesitantly, rubbing her arm with one of her hands. If it's not a bother. Not at all. Any in particular you want? He asked with a slightly less tired smile on his face. Also, I like this you a lot better than the nervous one from before. I'm glad you are loosening up. Thanks, she said, beaming at him. I like this much better myself, she added with a chuckle that the team leader shared. There was a moment of silence before IG broke it once more. I think you and Naruto will get along, he commented. She'd been hearing things about IG's surrogate brother for a while now, and she could honestly say that she thought so too. Having friends would be new, but she was looking forward to it. If it was anything like the team, then it was everything she'd ever wanted. Thank you, IG. Don't mention it. Oh. Kabuto Yakushi. Yuki whined on his lap, and he could only give her a tight smile. He knew exactly what had the Ninken so upset. It had the whole team on edge and concerned, and that was IG. They were on edge because he seemed to get annoyed very quickly. Granted, they had to do something very stupid still to get him angry, like Yujito had done, but the fact that he would snap like that instead of doing as usual and just pointing it out said a whole lot. They were also concerned, because like it or not, IG was their ticket back to society, at least for those that had worked with Orochimaru. He was the personification of their second chance at life. Nobody else would give a damn for the people that had helped the Snake Sanin of all people. The world would happily see them thrown into a cell and meld down the key. Tamarai and Yujito didn't quite get it, but Kabuto couldn't fault them for that. They were in completely different situations. If anything happened, they'd at most be sent back home, and that would be that. Kabuto tried to imagine it. He tried to picture how things would be if something happened with IG. If the other boy got tired of their mission and decided to call it quits. Nobody would be able to stop him if he suddenly said, yeah, you know what? I'm tired, I'll take a vacation. Or even if he decided to retire in a more permanent manner, what would people do? Force him? That was a joke. Kabuto was pretty sure there wasn't a single person in the world that could force IG to do anything. Oh, there were probably people that could beat him, yes, but the boy would put up a fight, of that there was no doubt. And if there was a fight, IG was bound to at least make the opponent pay the price of their insolence. Alternatively, the boy could die, if he continued like he was. Kabuto knew very well that IG's sanity was hanging by a thread. One just needed to look at him to notice. If he snapped, the absolute best outcome for him was that he decided to retire as a ninja. Other options were going rogue or getting himself killed. If any of those things happened, not only Kabuto, but Teiya and Jirobo would be screwed too. IG might have been doing his best to get Konoha to take them in like they were normal ninja, but the ex-spy knew that if he were to be out of the picture in any capacity, then that support would vanish. If there was nobody to vouch for them, then they'd be back to square one. Kabuto thought about how that would be. To be thrown back in a cell after having gotten a glimpse of what having an actual life was like. He couldn't let that happen, no. There was no way he'd just sit by as everything he'd built up was destroyed. He both cursed and thanked IG for showing him what he'd been missing all that time, if he was honest. IG had given him something he hadn't even known he wanted. An identity. What we do and what we feel, is what we are. Kabuto smiled at the memory of those words before momentarily closing his eyes. I'm Kabuto Yakushi. I like dogs and medicine. I dislike people that don't see me as a person. My dream for the future is to open an orphanage. In the meantime, I like spending time at the Inuzuka vet, training with the Suicide Squad. He thought, that last part almost making him chuckle. And finding out things about myself. It had taken so very long for him to come up with that. So many moments in which he wondered if something was truly him or if it was just a remnant of his past masks. Masks that had become a part of him, like a stain that he couldn't get rid of. Time had helped though, together with a lot of introspection. Kabuto felt like he was getting a handle on things. He was starting to be himself. And it was amazing. Who said that our identities have to be complicated? IG had been right about that too. The less Kabuto tried to think it over, the easier it was. Sometimes, he wouldn't even wonder anymore. It was like he was a completely different person now, which he supposed was an apt allegory. Where before choices had felt constricting and stiff, now they felt natural and easy. And he owed it all to his leader. It was why he was doing his best to help Tamrai control the squad while IG continued recovering. The girl tried her best and Kabuto could see why she'd been chosen to be the boy's second in command, but she wasn't quite there. She had the mind for it, but she didn't have the experience nor the power. Being strong didn't mean one would make a good leader, but for Tamrai, it was necessary. The girl's weakness meant she didn't have confidence in herself. She was probably the weakest of them all, except Yuki, and she knew it. That fact seemed to eat at her, undermining her leading skills. Kabuto sighed. It was what it was. IG couldn't very well choose someone else. The only other real option was Yujito, and IG wouldn't trust her. Oh, he trusted her to be a team member and to follow orders, for sure. However, the boy would never give her any kind of power if he could help it. Thus, Kabuto would have to help Tamrai. Fortunately, the squad was more than willing to accommodate IG for the moment. Teiya only needed to play her flute, which she loved to do anyway. Only thing Kabuto had to worry about was keeping her from being too annoying. Jirobo was a good choice if they had to communicate something whenever IG was in a particularly bad mood. The guy's calm and simple personality helped a lot. There were a whole lot of other things to keep in mind, but Kabuto owed IG a whole lot more. This was nothing in comparison. Oh. IG Sata. A slight smile spread over his face as he jumped over or on branches, running and maneuvering around obstacles. He'd decided that walking was a little too boring for him that day, but he didn't feel like flickering or tree hopping. Thus, he'd started free running through the forest. They'd finally entered the land of fire not so long ago, so the trees and forests were growing bigger and bigger. That made the whole idea even better, really, which might have been part of the reason why he'd come up with the idea. The team was keeping up, simply hopping over him, but he'd been slightly surprised when Fu had decided to join him. It made the whole thing even better, really, since then it felt like a bit of a race. Just a bit though, because the girl clearly didn't have that much practice with that in particular. Or, at least, not nearly as much as he had. Since they were going slower though, Tamrai had decided to join the fun in her own way. She'd taken to flying over them with her fan. She was going just the smallest bit slower than them, but she could easily catch up by using stronger wind techniques to push her to go a little faster for a little bit. Also, Gyrobo had expressed his desire to see if the two of them could come up with a mobility-based earth release jutsu. That was an interesting idea. IG would definitely help him with that. That was certainly something that he'd want to get himself. Maybe it'd start his incursion into yet another element. For the moment though, he was having fun, so he pushed those thoughts away. You having fun? IG asked his partner in parkour, who would occasionally let out a delighted laugh whenever she made a maneuver that looked particularly good. She'd also occasionally burst out chakra wings that would push her to correct her path whenever it looked like she'd made the wrong move. If that was any indication, Fu and her partner were certainly enjoying themselves. I am. She exclaimed, confirming his guess. She wore a big grin on her face, one that reminded him of Naruto and sometimes Ino. That was good, certainly better than the dead-eyed stare she wore when they met or the nervous wreck she'd been after joining them. That's more like it, he thought contentedly. I think it's even more fun inside a city. Maybe you can join me in Konoha sometime, he offered, because having someone join him was always much better. Kiba had done so a few times, but he'd joined sort of late, so they hadn't had that many opportunities. Naruto would go with him too, but most of the time it was only when it was on the way to a prank or something of the sort. He could certainly use a free-run buddy. That sounds awesome. Fu all but shouted, much more excited than before, for whatever reason. IG didn't try to understand too hard. He didn't want to put that much effort into thinking, after all. He was temporarily leaving that to Hakai and Kij. She took that as confirmation that things will be different in Konoha, Hakai informed him, which made sense. Indeed, he could see those kinds of thoughts forming in Fu's head. Just keep being you, Kij advised. No need to complicate things. It'll go well either way. And that was that. IG would take their word for it. He really couldn't be bothered. He was on a break. No work, no plans, no complications. Those were the rules he was following. He felt much better now, but there was no need to stop his little vacation if it truly could be called that. He could go back to full seriousness whenever they reached Konoha. Besides, it wasn't like he'd completely stopped working or whatever. It was just that he left that to his clones. Since their emotions became more muted whenever they dispelled, it didn't affect him too much, and they continued growing skills that he needed. It was win-win, really. He couldn't train physically like that, but that was a small price to pay, really. It wasn't even that great a loss, honestly. IG doubted he'd be growing his stats much through training anymore. Most of his latest progress had been made through quests more than actual hard work. It was likely to remain the case too, which was more than a little disappointing. Not even weight seals could help anymore, it seemed. It was sad, but it was what it was. Certainly helped him not feel guilty about his vacation though, so there was that. You are getting slower, IG. Fu told him, laughing as she passed him with ease when he got a little too distracted. Now, obviously, he couldn't let that be, that was for sure. Thus, he used a little burst of active free running to dash forward. He gave the girl a little kick on the shoulder as he both pushed himself forward and her backwards. Hey! First to the next clearing wins. He called over his shoulder, his smile widening. Hey! She protested again, even louder. She's using her wings, Shirakumo told him, which made him chuckle. Even the little spider sounded excited, even if she was just audience for their little game, basically. She's still not gonna win, he said, keeping free running active and adding normal running on top of that. No way he was losing a race. Who did the girl think she was? Energy skills didn't count as cheating, right? Maybe he could pull intermediate Taijutsu and Kenjutsu if he needed a little boost. He could definitely beat her without Jutsu. And you call the group childish? Kij asked, unimpressed. What can I say? IG replied with another short laugh. They've rubbed off on me. Chapter end. Hey guys. How's it going? Well, I like this chapter. Not sure you guys will, but I do. These last few chapters have worked well to help me through my burnout. I think the moment was perfect for me to pour some of that into IG's situation. It's helped me deal with it, or at least it's getting there. With any hope, me and IG will recover from this soon. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the chapter. As always, if you can't wait until next week for next chapter, there's up to 3 new chapters in my Patreon. patreon.com/Adrian King. Discord link, discord.gg/utdransts. Random question, I can't remember if I've asked this before, but, what's your favorite fandom? I don't think I have one myself. I usually keep jumping from one to the other as my interests shift. Right now I'm focusing more on Harry Potter and RWBY, I guess. If it's for writing, definitely High Cool DxD, ridiculous as that fandom is. See you. PS, people have been asking about status, skills and such, so I'll leave those here. Status. IG Sata. Main title, Anko Mitarashi's Apprentice. Secondary title, Prodigy. Energy points, 1180/1180. Chakra points, 1475/1475. Natural energy points, 0/1475. Beast chakra points, 0/0. Strength, 59. Dexterity, 62. Constitution, 59. Chakra, 59. Chakra control, A. Skills. Running, active, max. Free running, active, max. Physical conditioning, passive, max. Meditation, active, LVL max. Cooking LVL max. Stealth, active, LVL 40. Drawing max. Shuriken Jutsu. Shuriken throwing max. Fuuma Shuriken throwing max. Kunai throwing max. Senbon throwing max. Basic Taijutsu LVL max. Intermediate Taijutsu, active, max. Advanced Taijutsu LVL 18. Shogi LVL 49. Physical Resistance LVL 28. Bloodlust, active, max. Gardening max. Basic Chakra Control Exercises max. Intermediate Chakra Control Exercises max. Advanced Chakra Control Exercises max. Calligraphy max. Fuinjutsu LVL 5. Poison Crafting max. Lightning Manipulation LVL 30. Lightning Release, Sparkling Shuriken max. Lightning Release, Stunning Thread max. Lightning Release, Flashing Shuriken Max. Lightning Release, Electromagnetic Strike Max. Lightning Release, Electromagnetic Murder Max. Lightning Release, Lightning Flicker Max. Lightning Release, Lightning Beast Tracking Fang, LVL 15. Lightning Release, Who Are You, Max. Lightning Release, Sacred Flock, Max. Yin Release, Basic Mirage Max. Yin Release, Minor Mirage Max. Yin Release, Intermediate Mirage LVL 11. Yin Release, Advanced Mirage LVL 7. Yin Release, Greater Mirage LVL 4. Yin Release, Mortal Reminder LVL 4. Yin Release, Wits End LVL 8. Yin Release, Genjutsu Dissipation Max. Yin Release, Eternal Purge Max. First Aid Max. Healing Palm Technique Max. Clone Technique Max. Transformation Technique Max. Substitution Technique Max. Hopping Technique Max. Body Flicker Technique Max. Fire Manipulation LVL 18. Fire Release, Embers LVL Max. Fire Release, Fireball Max. Fire Release, Conflagration Level 10. Fire Release, Sunfire Cape Level 15. Basic Kenjutsu Max. Intermediate Kenjutsu, Active, Max. Advanced Kenjutsu LVL 17. Chakra Flow, Lightning Max. Chakra Flow, Fire LVL 8. New Iberi Mastery 19. Living Thread Technique Max. Web Sense Technique Max. Summoning Technique, Spiders, Max. Beast Chakra Resistance LVL 41. Lightning Resistance LVL 15. Poison Resistance LVL 39. Fire Resistance LVL 22. Chakra Beast Mode, LVL 17. Shadow Clone Technique, LVL 16. World Ender, Max. Senjutsu of the Spiders LVL 18. Lightning Release, Relentless Storm LVL 12. Subtle Fist Taijutsu LVL 14. Last Embrace LVL 18. Whiplash LVL 19. Noxious Trap LVL 9. Titles. Academy Student, improves the rate at which your stats and skills increase by 5%. Aspiring Prodigy, improves the rate at which your stats and skills increase by 10%. Prodigy, improves the rate at which your stats and skills increase by 15%. Genin of Konoha. Increases stats when taking part on a Konoha sanctioned mission by 10%. Increases skill efficiency when taking part on a Konoha sanctioned mission by 5%. Chuanin of Konoha. Increases stats when taking part on a Konoha sanctioned mission by 20%. Increases skill efficiency when taking part on a Konoha sanctioned mission by 10%. Jounin of Konoha. Increases stats when taking part on a Konoha sanctioned mission by 30%. Increases skill efficiency when taking part on a Konoha sanctioned mission by 15%. Anko Mitarashi's Apprentice. Improves the rate at which your stats and skills level up by 25% while under Anko Mitarashi's guidance. Further improves the rate at which Fire Release and Yin Release Jutsu level up by 20%. Further improves the rate at which poison-related skills level up by 20%. Shadow of the Shinobi. Increases stats when taking part on a not officially sanctioned mission by 25%. Increases skill efficiency when taking part on a not officially sanctioned mission by 12.5%. Wielder of New Iberi. Increases stats when wielding New Iberi by 30%. Contractor of the Spider Clan. Increases stats when fighting alongside members of the Spider Clan by 20%. The Weaver. Increases stats when fighting alongside members of the Spider Clan by 20%. Increases stats when fighting with New Ivory by 35%. Increases the effects of Bloodlust when using threads by 30%. Increases the effects of thread-based techniques by 30%. Increases the effects of lightning release techniques by 10%. Increases the effects of fire release techniques by 5%. Redemption of the Leaf. Increases stats when fighting in and for the Land of Earth by 30%. Increases skill efficiency when fighting in and for the Land of Earth by 25%. Perks. Inner Strength. Increased resistance to outside influence on the user's mind and body. Not applied to Genjutsu. Leader. The user's stats increase by 10% when fighting for or with a subordinate or ally. Autodidact. Improves the rate at which the user's stats and skills improve when training without a teacher by 10%. Poised. When activating an EP-based skill at full energy points, the user can use EP skills without cost for 10 seconds. Usable once a day. Bloodhound. The user's stats are increased by 15% when facing a bleeding foe. Resilience, intermediate. The user recovers from injuries moderately faster than normal. Knockout. Increases the chances of knocking the opponent out with a hit. Calm Spirit. Increases chakra point gain for every chakra level by 50%. Shuriken Jutsu Master. Increases damage with Shuriken Jutsu weapons by 20%. Increases accuracy with Shuriken Jutsu weapons by 20%. Increases travel distance of Shuriken Jutsu weapons by 20%. Beast of Prey. The user's stats increase by 10% when facing a weaker or injured foe. Unnerving Presence. Victims of bloodlust weaker or equal to the user have their stats reduced by 10%. Jutsu Creator. Improves the rate at which personally created jutsu level up by 30%. Increases the efficiency of personally created jutsu by 15%. Improves the rate at which all jutsu level up by 20%. Increases the efficiency of all jutsu by 10%. Contractor of the Spider Clan. Opens the possibility of Spider Senjutsu for the user. Spirit Surge. Increases chakra point gain for every chakra level by 50%. Increases chakra point regeneration by 100% every 10 levels. Iron Will. The user can ignore pain at will. Metal of Man. The user's stats increase by 10% when facing a foe with higher stats than them. The user's stats increase by 10% when facing more than 3 foes at once. Clones do not count for the effect. Disciple of the Sage. Increases chakra point gain for every chakra level by 50%. Increases chakra point regeneration by 100% every 10 levels. Improves the rate at which Senjutsu levels up by 25%. Increases the efficiency of Senjutsu by 10%. Jinshuriki of Tsuchigumo. Grants access to beast chakra points. IG. It's fine, he said, giving Kabuto a tight smile as he took a step back. The minty glow around the Mednin's hand vanished as he ended his technique. Everything all right? The team leader asked then. As good as you can be, the ex-spy answered, which was good enough for him. Great, he nodded, giving the man a slight smile when he shot a mild glare his way. You are doing a great job, by the way. Keep it up. What do you? I'm taking a little break, Kabuto, But I'm not blind, Ig said, amused that Kabuto thought he wouldn't notice. He always had his web sense active, especially after the mess with Sasori. Last thing he needed was to be caught off guard again. No, that wouldn't happen. Thanks for keeping an eye on everyone. It's no problem, Kabuto replied, looking like he didn't know how to react or proceed from there. I thought given your desire to rest, we could do our part and make things easier on you. Ig was very amused by that response, and he wasn't the only one. Hakai and Kij's brushed against his own, meshing together in a slightly weird feeling. Sachigumo, for her part, was all but laughing, mostly because of what they were feeling though, really. You are certainly helping, so thanks, he told the Mednin, his eyes dropping a little until they were only half open, his posture deflating as he slouched forward. Anyone that I have to have a talk with? Ig asked. He was pretty sure nobody had been particularly problematic from what he'd picked up, but he had to admit that his focus had been looking for threats, not on his team. With Sasori out, there was nobody in the team that was likely to betray him, he thought. Especially not after his little display after dealing with Kakuzu. He was pretty sure he'd scared the fuck out of everyone, if their behavior afterwards was any indication. Not that I know of, Kabuto reassured him with a slight smirk. On that note though, I better go make sure it stays that way, don't you think? Go ahead, man. Best of luck, Ig replied, waving the boy off. So, it's really happening? Shirakumo asked, sounding subdued. There are a few things that could help, but otherwise, yes, he replied, smiling sadly as the spider pushed herself against the side of his neck and his cheek. Don't worry too much though. There's lots of time. For now, she shot back. Don't worry about it, he repeated, but the little thing didn't seem very eager to listen to him. Now, let's go with Teiya, yeah. We gotta keep working on your genjutsu training or your mother will get angry with me. Okay, was the simple answer the spider gave him. After that, he momentarily closed his eyes before starting to move. Oh. Teiya. Thanks for this, Ig told her, through genjutsu, just like she usually did with everyone else. It was the first time he did so himself though. Then again, he'd said he wanted to start using illusions more. I know it kind of gets on your way. It's no problem. Makes for a light warm-up, I guess, she replied, as was usual lately, hesitating with her words. She knew her personality was aggravating at best and the situation didn't allow for room to mess up now. The last thing she wanted was to screw up her chance by annoying Ig a little too much, which seemed like something that was more likely to happen at that moment, all things considered. Whitey is the least annoying one around, honestly, she added as she continued playing her flute. Well, you are not wrong about that, Ig replied, turning towards his shoulder where the arachnid sat struggling to break from the illusions Teiya kept placing on her. You moved a tree's branch, Shirakumo pointed out after dissipating a genjutsu. That was part of the exercise. She had to find what the illusion was doing. After all, out in the field, you couldn't know if you were being placed under one unless you had that kind of perception. Correct, Teiya replied with her illusion voice as she went to place another illusion. You don't need to be so tense, Ig said after a moment of just hearing her music. He seemed to love it, which was nice. People usually didn't complain about it, but they didn't enjoy it either. Her music being ignored was worse than it being disliked, in Teiya's opinion. At least if people complained, it was because it generated an emotion in them. If they didn't care, then what was the point? So, it was nice to have someone that liked her music, even with the eerie and sometimes unnerving tunes. You are annoying, yes, but if I've put up with you this far, then I can do so a little longer. Just don't be annoying around higher-ups and don't cause too much trouble with the team. That's all I ask for. I think I can do that, fearless leader Taeya replied, considering his words. Feel free to annoy Yujito if she's being an idiot, IG commented then, gaining her attention instantly. Being given free rein to make someone hate her. Sign her the fuck up. She's testing me at the worst time, but I don't want to cause an international event. I'll keep an eye on her, Taeya said with a nod, ideas forming in her head. Maybe she could make her hear gibberish the next time she tried to get information out of Skitter. Or maybe she could give false information. Oh, that sounded good. She'd need to check with IG and Kabuto, but it sounded like a good plan. Truly, she'd lucked out with her team leader, she thought to herself. Oh. IG Sata. So, you've made up your mind? He asked, a dispirited smile on his face. I have, Tamrai answered, giving a similar grin back. I like working with you, and the team is great, for the most part. But I'm not strong enough for this, she admitted, looking down. I'm not ready yet. You don't have to give me reasons, Tamrai. It's fine, he reassured, waving the whole thing off. As it was, the team was out of their league with the remaining Akatsuki members. There was no way they'd be able to do anything in those situations. At most, he could count on them buying a little time. And that was the best case scenario. Chances were that they would die. Thus, he'd offer them a chance to leave it once he reached Konoha. He'd already decided to convince Hiruzen, Tsunade and Danza to give Kabuto, Taeya and Jirobo a chance, leave Yuki with his friends and send Tamrai and Yujito back home. That would be it for the Suicide Squad, he supposed. Yujito might be able to help, but he didn't trust her enough to be alone with her, and he'd prefer to work by himself than to have to constantly watch his back with no backup. I feel like. Tamrai, I said it's fine, he repeated, giving her as reassuring a smile as he could manage. I was already planning on dissolving this team once we reached Konoha, he admitted, making her eyes widen. The people that remain out there to hunt, you guys most probably wouldn't survive fighting against. You are great, but great isn't enough against these people. I see. So, you'll be going back to Suna once we reach Konoha. If anything happens over there, buy time. I have spiders keeping an eye on things. If anything happens, I'll be there as fast as possible, he told her. Might as well have the conversation then, if they were already talking about the future. Which I guess would be pretty fast, Tamrai commented with a slight grin. You bet. I might arrive before you finish calling, he shot back with a light chuckle. That was a thought though. How fast would he be able to travel if he put his all into it? With such Igumo and maybe Senjutsu, the flickers and energy skills. That sounded like he'd go pretty damn fast. I wouldn't even be that surprised, Tamrai said, looking down and her smile dimming. I'll miss this, I think. I think I will too, he admitted, turning to look at the rest of the group, sitting somewhere a little further to the side. He often took moments to sit by himself and enjoy the relative quietness of those days. A whining sound made him tilt his head down towards Yuki, who had her head on his lap. You too, huh? He asked, placing a hand between the canine's ears. Oh. Kid's having fun, Hakai commented from where she sat in front of him, inside the mindscape. In her hands was a guitar that she was playing. IG supposed he shouldn't be surprised the twins had gotten good with the instruments he'd made for them, even if they weren't familiar with them. They had the time to practice, he guessed. Good for him, he commented with a slight smile as he felt Tsuchigumo's soft fur against his back. The eight-legged wolf was sitting on the ground, acting as a backrest for him. The chakra beast seemed quite content with that, and he certainly found the training ground peaceful, so it worked for both of them. The ambient music provided by Hakai certainly helped. I'm sure the same can't be said about the team. He'd started letting the twins do some physical training for him. Not a whole lot, since he'd still feel the soreness and weariness later, but still. Kabuto would usually help him deal with those a little better. He couldn't be bothered to put up with that at the moment, honestly. Only reason he was going through the trouble was because the twins liked to do it, really. If not, he'd been happy with the progress his clones were making on his skills and would have called it a day with just that. I'm sure they missed the training, Hakai commented, with a smile that spelled nothing good for the squad. You know that they won't need to be that strong going forward, right? There should be a relatively calm time after Akatsuki is out of the picture. Hell, they probably won't even have to deal with them, Ig pointed out. Idly, looking at one of the deers that he'd made for Sachi to hunt in the distance, he wondered what else he could make. They'd made birds and a handful of other things, but he wanted for there to be more life in his mindscape. Maybe he could start with the weather though, because the sunny one was nice and all, but some wind and a few clouds would be nice. Adding night sure sounded like a good idea too. You don't think they'll follow you anyway? Hakai asked, and he chuckled. What? Follow me to their deaths against the remaining Akatsuki members? I know we called ourselves Suicide Squad, but come on, he said, still laughing. You'd be surprised what people can do when you are the only one that is willing to help, his mind creation said solemnly, giving him a sad smile. How you manage to so severely underestimate the things you do even in your own mind outstands me, Ig, she added. You've pulled the Sound Ninja and Kabuto from the verge of having their lives ruined and wasted. I imagine there are few things they wouldn't do for you. You can't know that. I can, Ig, Hakai insisted, her fingers stopping and with them the music. Kij and I, there's few things we wouldn't do for you either. Not when we know all that you do, all that you think. You aren't fighting alone, Ig. Maybe it's time you realize that. There was silence then. The quiet stretched for a while, with the boy unsure of how to respond to that and Hakai leaving her message to sink in. Eventually, she started playing again, but nobody in the mindscape said anything even when Kij finished training and he swapped places with Ig. His mind remained without voices for a while, not even his own. Oh! Ig's ears picked up with the slightly annoying clicking sound of wood hitting wood and metal hitting metal. Normally, it was a sound that would have concerned him at least a little, especially after Sasori had gone rogue on them. However, he knew the puppet master was in the spider's realm and heavily guarded, just like Kakuzu and Haiden. Besides, there was nothing that escaped his web sense. He'd grown even more paranoid than before, keeping an eye on everything. It was good that he was taking a rest from most things, because just keeping watch on his surroundings took its own toll on him. The point was, he simply turned around and raised an eyebrow. Ha, it works, Kabuto said, his eyes fixed on the three-fingered hand puppet. It looked like a wooden bird foot, the little claws clicking as he tested this movement or that. What do you think? I learned a few things from Sasori. You think it's worth working on? It might be, Ig replied with a tilt of his head. Puppets could be very handy for a lot of things. If one were good at multitasking, they could work as pseudo-shadow clones. Sometimes even more useful than those, depending on the situation, with all the tools you could put into them and the fact that they didn't disappear with the slightest of hits. So long as you didn't learn his backstabbing ways, Four Eyes Taeya commented, out loud for once. It seemed even she could get tired of playing. The silence around felt strange to Ig, like it did every time the girl put her flute down. Considering she played for most of the time she was awake, he thought it was a fair reaction. Still, he couldn't help but want to fill that silence. Maybe I should learn how to play an instrument, he mused. No worries there, Caputo replied dryly. If I had any such ideas, I don't have them anymore after what happened. As if he did in the first place, Kij said in Ig's mind. Well, I'm sure there must be some information about puppet making and control in Konoha. If not, I'm sure we can get some from Suna, right? The leader mused, before turning towards Tamrai with that question. We are allies now, I'm sure there won't be any problems as long as you don't spread that knowledge around, she answered after thinking that question over. I know some things from Kankuro, if you are interested. I guess I can look into it on our way back and decide then, Caputo considered before nodding to himself. Then the small clawed hand moved through the air and picked up a branch from the ground. Oh! Your mindscape sounds like both a nightmare and a dream, Taeya Ig commented, sitting on the ground together with the 2x Sound 4 ninja. He was currently helping them with their mindscape training to deal with the cursed mark. He'd been doing that for a good while now, and they were progressing nicely. They could now safely use the first stage without being influenced at all. Every use of the thing needed some time to repair damage, but overall it was a viable tool in their arsenal now, instead of a security risk. From there, they were now working towards making it so that the thing didn't affect their mindscapes and maybe start working on their second stage. You are one to talk, fearless leader, the redhead shot back. I can't believe you put that in your mind. You are absolutely mad, she said, which was a fair accusation, he supposed. The both of them had been quite shocked, especially Taeya, when he'd told them that a portion of his mindscape was just the void. He thought the girl didn't have that much room to talk. Her mindscape, apparently, wasn't even a physical place. It was made completely of sound, apparently, or music if one wanted to be more accurate. Honestly, Ig had a difficult time picturing how that would be. I can't even begin to imagine how being in your mind would be, he commented. I'm sure the Bimbo clan could throw you in, Taeya commented, and he was both tempted and worried by the proposition. Her head sounded like a dangerous place to be in for a variety of reasons. I think I'll pass, he replied with a wry smile as she cackled. Have I told you how much I appreciate you being so normal, Gyrobo? I don't think you have, the boy told him, although he wore a similar grin to his own on his face. Then again, how normal can I be, if I'm part of this team? Gyrobo asked, which was fair, Ig supposed. You are not wrong, he replied. So, how is yours coming along? I can't barely understand what Taeya's saying, so I guess she's on her own, he commented with a chuckle. I think I liked my idea of building a pond with a place for me to be safe in the middle. I'll grow it from there, but I want a solid place first. Something that won't fall apart when using the mark, Gyrobo explained, and Ig considered that idea. It sounded solid. How well it'd work was something they'd have to find out later though. We can work on that. Even if a place in your mindscape is okay, we need to protect your actual mind. Put most of it in that zone and then work from there, Ig explained. He'd barely kept his mind when Sachigumo raged through it. He didn't know how the mark affected things, but he was sure it wasn't much better. When the chakra beast gave a whimpering sound, he sent a wave of reassurance towards her. It wasn't even really her fault, so she didn't need to feel guilty anyway. She just needed to understand that. "We'll take care of that hack," I told him, and he mentally nodded. Time to focus on helping his team. Oh. They've got to be kidding. Is this because of Freaky? Teiya grumbled, nervously looking around as they walked through the streets of Konoha. Unfortunately for IG, there had been no friendly reunion at the gates. Instead, once they showed up there, a group of Anbu appeared in front of them. Immediately afterwards, they'd been told to make their way to the Hokage Tower. The redhead's guess as to why they were being escorted by the aforementioned group was a good one, IG would admit. However, he had another idea that had him failing to control his killing intent. Everyone was tense because of that, even his escorts. There was little mistake to be made though, considering the cat-masked Anbu to his right. Or, more importantly, the face that was hidden behind it. He could see it clear as day with his web sense. "We knew it was a possibility," Kage said, but even he sounded annoyed. "Everything all right, IG?" Kabuto asked hesitantly, but IG could respect that he did. It couldn't be easy, considering how he must have looked like. "No," he answered curtly. "I'm angry. Very much so. Someone must have screwed up big time," Teiya pointed out. "It seems so," IG agreed, even though she was just reading that from him instead of actually guessing. She didn't seem to be wrong. If he was right though. His bloodlust grew heavier around them. So much so that even the civilians that stayed further away seemed to be affected. IG Sata, one of their escorts, started, before stopping when the boys' eyes turned towards them. IG simply waited then, to see if they dared say something. He'd been having a terrible time since he left on his last mission. Now this was added on top of that, and no amount of resting and taking it easy would keep his mood up. He wanted a goddamned break. However, since the world seemed intent on screwing him over, then he would make sure that everyone else had as hard a time as he did. It was only fair, right? If they weren't going to help, then they better be ready. "Take it from someone that knows," Jirobo said then, directing his words towards the Anbu. "You don't want to annoy IG right now. Or ever. So, do your job and leave it at that, yeah." Surprisingly, or maybe not so much, the Anbu nodded stiffly and took a step away from the squad as they continued moving. Turning back forwards, IG continued on his way, with his team walking behind him on both sides, the whole group being surrounded by Anbu. They must have made quite the sight, he supposed. The good thing about that was that his friends would probably hear about his arrival really quick, since it was so over the top. Eventually they made it to the tower, in tense silence. "What happened?" IG asked, once he was standing in front of the three people he was starting to associate with the office. Hiruzen, Danza and Tsunade. "No, hello?" Tsunade asked, but even she seemed to know it was not the time, because her smile seemed supremely forced. In response, IG simply raised an eyebrow. The room remained silent, with the Anbu team positioned against the walls and looked at the squad. One of them, one that had already been in the office before they arrived, all but appeared in front of IG, passing a file to him. Opening it, he felt his eyebrow twitch as he started reading. "Why am I not surprised?" he asked under his breath, but clearly not low enough. "Because you are not stupid," Tsunade asked, her grimace of a smile remaining in place as Hiruzen took a drag from his pipe and Danza's expression seemed to turn more sour than usual. There's a number of things we can do about this though. What do we know about Akatsuki? IG asked instead of continuing with that thread of conversation. He needed to check on some things first, but he already had things in mind. Another Anbu appeared, passing him yet another file. IG? Tamrai asked, but he didn't turn towards her as he started reading. Tamrai is leaving the team. She'll go back to Suna, he informed his superiors absently. We'll arrange for an escort, Hiruzen said, but it was obvious that he was waiting on IG to say something regarding either Akatsuki or this new problem. So, silence fell around them once more as he considered the information in front of him. A smile slowly formed on his face. Well, someone's fucked, he heard Taeya mutter next to him. She wasn't wrong. I'll take care of this, IG said, closing the files and storing them in a seal. You lot go to the usual training grounds, he said, his wires moving out of his sight. Instantly, he received a nod from both Tamrai and Kabuto. Is there anything you need? Surprisingly, it was Danza the one to ask that. Fuinjutsu study material, lots of it, he said as the squad started leaving the room. Instantly, all three of his superiors' eyebrows rose. I kind of like the coat, so if you guys could get me one that's actually built for ninja use, that'd be nice, he commented, almost flippantly. Having some ramen from Ishiraku delivered to the training grounds when I arrive would be nice. Who are you, the brat? Tsunade asked, looking almost amused if it weren't for the sad glint in her eyes. The other two simply nodded to everything he listed. He was pretty sure Hiruzen was directing a resigned expression towards him. Anything else? The current Hokage asked. Next time, don't have me escorted here like I'm some kind of criminal. Or I'll do something drastic. Noted. IG walked, barely managing to keep his mood between calm and absolutely furious. At least then and there he was alone, thankfully. There was no escort, and he could move at his own pace through the streets of Konoha. He'd sent a clone to his team with instructions to train and talk with Tamrai. There was new information to process that would affect some of their plans and ideas regarding the sand, after all. It was basically keeping them busy though. In the meantime, his mind swung between what he wanted to do and what he'd soon need to do. It certainly kept his mood from being good, even in his own village with its cheery and full of life sights. Slowly, as he walked, that perception changed. There were less people around as he continued moving, which made sense. He was getting closer to his destination, after all. Soon, there was nobody in the streets but him. IG approached a specific house then, but as he reached the door, he looked around. That one doesn't look that bad, he mused when one of the buildings got his attention, setting the twins on a debate on if that was actually a good house or not. He let out the smallest of smiles as he heard them discuss the topic with utmost seriousness. He knew at least half of that was just to humor and distract him, but he appreciated it. Eventually, his knuckles hit the wood in front of him. It didn't take long for the door to open. IG, welcome back, Sajuk said, slightly surprised but still managing to say that without sounding so. To say the boy was grinning would be an exaggeration, but his eyes told IG everything he needed to know. As far as he was concerned, this was the warmest of greetings. Everyone's here already. Did something happen? He asked then, showing a hint of concern in his voice as he made space for IG to walk in. Giving him a reassuring smile, he looked around the Uchiha house, doing his best to avoid looking at Ona for a long moment. Then he sighed. There was no point avoiding the issue, was there? Although, he'd much prefer to only have to say things once. Let's go so I can tell everyone, yeah. IG said, getting a stiff nod back and pursed lips from Sasuke. Obviously, the Uchiha had picked up that this wouldn't be precisely a happy meeting. IG. Naruto all but shouted as soon as he walked into the dining room, where everyone was already sitting around a big table. It wasn't a happy greeting, that was for sure. He could see it on the blonde's face and on everyone else's. They were worried. He wondered if that was because of him calling all of them to Sasuke's place or because of how he looked. Or both, Kage pointed out. Get it over with, okay? Shikamaru said, resting his head on his palm. He almost looked like usual, if not for the frown that marred his features. We know you have something to say, so, out with it. I'll be leaving soon, he said, watching as everyone's expressions fell. I probably won't be here even for a week. Things got crazy really quick. Iwa, huh? The Nara asked, and IG nodded. We know. My father said, some of us are likely to get a mission over there, or in the land of Earth, at least. They've been telling Naruto that he probably will be sent to Suna. That was news to IG. Not the first part, since that had been part of the file he'd been given. But the Jinchuriki being sent to the Land of Wind wasn't included there. It didn't take him long to figure out though. The blonde would be perfect to work with Gaara, probably, and he could hold his ground if anything happened. It was also probably so that IG himself would be even more likely to get involved in case of emergencies. It was probably a silent threat to everyone else too, since it was probable that the world knew of their sibling relationship. Konoha had kept the Uzumaki within the village for a while already. They couldn't do that forever. Both because it'd drive the blonde crazy and because it'd look bad in the eyes of the world. Things were already shaky at best, especially with the new problems that came up. The last thing they needed was to look even weaker, afraid to let their Jinchuriki out of their walls. I see, IG said before humming. We might see each other over there if you go, then he added. Although by their expression, they believed that about as much as he did. I have to prepare for this mission and I won't have that much time. I called everyone here because you wanted to see everyone, talk to everyone. Ino finished for him when he struggled to come up with the words. There were understanding expressions around, like they knew him better than he knew himself. Not very surprising, Hakai said softly in his mind. You are not quite all there, I gotta say. He hated that she was right. Yeah, basically, IG admitted with a bitter smile. Well, I definitely have a lot to tell you, the Yamanaka said enthusiastically, although he could tell that it was mostly for show. Like, you have no idea how cute Naruto and Hinata have been, she commented, making the two sputter embarrassedly. Or Karen and Sasuke, that's new stuff, but they are not quite there yet, she added, making the Uchiha next to IG look away when he turned towards him, and the girl turned as red as her hair. You look tired, IG Shino pointed out, as subtle as a sledgehammer, pushing his shades up. I feel tired, he admitted. He wanted to lie, he really did, but for some reason he couldn't muster the energy to do even that. He smiled wearily at his friends when they fell silent at his words. But it is what it is. There'll be peace and quiet soon. I'm sure. It's just a matter of time. So, back to cheery topics, Ino announced after a long, solemn pause, and gave Shino the side eye. IG just gave her a grateful smile even as her expression said nothing good for someone. You wouldn't believe what Kiba's sister told me. Wait, what? The Inuzuka of the group asked, clearly caught off guard by that line of conversation. I'm listening, Ig said, smiling contentedly as he took a seat on the table. Maybe the moment would be short, but he wanted to make the most of it. Oh. Thanks for everything, Tamrai said, giving him a slight smile. You've helped me improve a lot. Thank you, Tamrai, he shot back with a grin. Trying to keep this bunch under control by myself would have been a nightmare. Honestly, I don't know what I'm gonna do now, he joked, drawing a snort from the girl. Take care, everyone, the blonde said, letting her eyes move to look at the rest of the squad behind him. I think I might miss you. Even Taya. Bitch, please. You'll miss me the most, the redhead scoffed, drawing a chuckle from everyone else. What you laughing about, bunch of idiots? Good luck, Ig told Tamrai then with a smile. You too, she replied with a nod. Seems like you all need it more than me, she added, giving him a look which he smiled wryly to. See you around, she said out loud. A moment later, the group was already down a member. And counting, Hakai commented. So, our next mission will be sooner than we expected, Ig announced, turning to regard the rest of his squad. We are going to Iwa. But first, his red eyes locked onto one member of the team, something that didn't go unnoticed by anyone. We got a deal with a second traitor, it seems. Ig. What are you? Yujito started, before wires wrapped around her. He didn't use anything other than living thread at the moment though. Ig. You know, my threads, I can feel with them, Ig commented, seemingly absently as he walked towards her. You know that though. Did you know I can read with that too? He asked then. She kept to her act though. Ig, I don't know what you are talking about, she told him, not even trying to struggle against the wires. The messages you sent to Kumo. They were in code, we both know that, he told her with a tired smile. Now, I'm no coder, I'll admit. But I don't need to be. I just needed to copy what you wrote and send that here for our cryptanalysis team to look at, he explained, starting to slowly pace around the woman, who fell silent. You know where that's going, right? He asked then, stopping on her side, sticking his hands in his coat's pockets. He stood there, almost like he was next to a friend and not an enemy. I didn't know you could read with those, Yujito commented then, her confused and afraid tone fading into resignation. You didn't tell us that. I didn't tell you a lot of things, Ig replied, giving her a smile and a shrug. Did you think I'd be that naive? I guess we were wrong. Yeah, you were, he agreed with a nod as he turned to look back ahead. His sensing ability told him all he needed to know anyway. Looking was optional at that point, really. So, now we'll have to go to Iwa and make sure Kumo knows that Konoha isn't weak and spread out enough for them to be idiots. Thanks for that, by the way. And me. And you, well. Take a guess, Ig told her with another shrug. I'm not gonna have to do something drastic, right? He asked Yujito, who gave him a bitter smile that he mirrored. It won't be necessary, she said, which he was grateful for. He was confident that he could take her down easily at that point, but he'd rather not have to fight. You are lucky Konoha is trying its hardest to keep peaceful and friendly relationships with the big nations. Otherwise we'd probably extract the two tails from you and be done with it, he mused, looking at her tense up. With the 9 tails and now the 7 tails, he said, nodding towards Fu, who was looking from the side with an expression that said she didn't even know what to think of the situation. Adding the two tails would basically make us unstoppable. But the nations wouldn't just let that be. Even those that are friendly with the leaf, Yujito commented. Indeed, IG agreed easily. Which is why we'll just stick you into a cell until the cloud has been slapped back into place. No one in Konoha can beat B-Summer, Yujito pointed out, to which he gave a positively bloodthirsty grin, not unlike the one he'd given Kakuzu during their fight. Are you absolutely sure about that? Would you bet your village on that? IG asked, stepping closer to the woman. Because I like my chances a lot more than I did back during the invasion, he commented, seeing the doubt creeping behind the woman's eyes. That's what I thought, he added with a smirk. Now, be good and follow me to the prison, yeah. IG told her, moving her wires aside. IG. Kabuto called, looking nervously between the two tails, Jinchuriki and him. Kabuto, you are my second in command now, IG announced, still staring directly into Yujito's eyes. We've just come back from a mission. Take Fu somewhere nice and get yourselves something to eat, okay? I was told there's some things to be resolved about her, so we have to keep an eye on her for the time being. I can do that, the Mednin replied. Good, and Fu, IG called, making the poor girl stand straight and still. Relax, if you see something that catches your attention, go wild. We are your escorts right now, nothing else. Just don't do anything stupid. Otherwise, do whatever you want. Oh, okay. She said, although it sounded more like a question than an affirmation though. IG gave Kabuto a look, to which the other boy nodded, understanding. Well, with that out of the way, let's go, yeah. He told Yujito, who gave him a defeated grin. Oh. Ino Yamaneka. Are you sure you want to do this? I'm sure we could convince Mom to let us go out and do something else, Ino asked, for once not actually trying to avoid working at the flower shop. She just wanted to help IG rest, honestly. He looked absolutely awful. I'm fine doing this, the boy said, his voice coming off low, like he lacked the energy to even speak. She'd believe that if it were the case. Ever since he came back, the general word that she used in her mind to describe IG was tired. Sometimes, he'd look like he would fall asleep at the drop of a hat. Sometimes, he looked like his mind was barely there. It was unnerving and concerning. There's no rush, the boy continued talking then, and she listened intently from behind the counter. It's quiet and the plants are just beautiful, he commented. It gave Ino pause, as she considered his words and the context they were said in. She knew his missions were far from easy. So, she guessed she could see how the boring work could be seen as calming. It also made her wonder if that was why her family had the shop in the first place. Was it merely something to help them relax? She gulped, remembering all the times she'd complained and outright insulted the shop. I guess I can see that, she mumbled, suddenly embarrassed. We can do something else, if you are bored though, he told her, giving her a smile that was nothing like the cheery one she remembered from before. Before his missions, before the invasion, before graduating. It looked awful, if she was honest. The way it barely pulled at the corners of his mouth, making it look like a weary grimace more than anything else. The way it twisted the scar over his eye, making it even more prominent. I'm good. At least we can gossip, she commented, trying to bring a little more levity to the situation. Ino expected a grumble or at least a grimace at her words. Instead, he just chuckled. I've told you a whole lot about everyone over here, but what about you, IG? Something we should know. Have you been keeping a girlfriend hidden somewhere? Because I would tell you if I did. he asked, sounding more amused than anything else. She scoffed. Of course you would. Like you can say no to this face, she boasted exaggeratedly as she put on the innocent pretty face that she'd often used to get other boys to do as she liked. It didn't quite work with the ones in the group, but that was a given. They knew better already, as did IG. Oh no, whatever shall I do? He said with a deadpan before he let out another chuckle. But seriously, there must be something, Ino complained, resting her elbows on the counter and her face on her palms. Nothing at all, IG replied with a shrug, his eyes moving to a potted plant to his side. I've been busy, I guess. The most I could tell you is that we spent some time sightseeing around Taki. Sounds fun, Ino told him honestly. Did you draw any of it? His response was a grin that told her all she needed to know. Of course he did. IG liked to draw anything that caught his attention if he had the time for it, and he certainly did by the way he'd said that. She'd have to remember to ask about that later. But seriously, you need to go out more. I never have anything about you, you know. You spend all your time with us or with your team, she pointed out, drawing a confused expression from the boy. Of course he didn't get it. As opposed to what? Being with strangers. I'm busy enough as is. I barely get enough time to spend with you, guys, he replied with a scoff. IG, you know what I'm talking about, Ino all but whined. We are 14 and I've never heard of you even noticing someone. And before you say it, you know perfectly well what I mean, she added quickly when he saw the response coming. What can I say, IG said instead after shrugging. I've just not been interested. Besides, I haven't heard about you either, you know. He shot back, to which Ino simply raised an eyebrow at him. Besides Sajuk, that is. Well, I'll have you know that I went on a few dates myself, Ino revealed easily. If it'd get IG to open up, she'd gladly tell him. He was bound to be much less annoying than the others would be if they found out, at least. It didn't work out, but I did. Ha. Well, good luck next time, I guess. If you have trouble finding someone to put up with you, I can think of a few people to introduce you to, he offered with a good-natured grin. He even looked like he already had someone in mind, although Ino couldn't fathom who that could be. He barely interacted with anyone that was out of the group or his team. Maybe that was it. She'd heard a few things about the Mednin, Kabuto, and Kibar's sister, actually, so she ruled that out. Although, gossip could be inaccurate. She'd leave it as a probably not. Then there was the other boy, which she didn't know much about, really. He didn't seem very sociable when the two groups had met, but then again, neither had Shino. A maybe for that one, she supposed. Was there anyone else? Wait, she paused, making him raise an eyebrow at her. Don't distract me, mister, she growled, threatening him with a finger, to which he grinned back at her. We were talking about you. Were we? He asked, clearly amused. Are you sure? Because I'm interested in these dates. I don't have to beat up anybody, do I? No need, Ino replied with an unimpressed expression. Well, it was worth a try, wasn't it? IG mumbled, looking to the side, although he was still grinning. It was a noble effort, she told him, raising an eyebrow as if telling him, I'm waiting. I just have had a lot in my mind, IG tried, which was just sad. Ino knew all about where he was going. I just haven't had the time. Seriously? She asked, shooting him an unimpressed look. That's your excuse. No time. What? It's the truth. He protested, and it looked like he believed that, which only made things worse. She started softly, and she could almost predict the roll of his eyes. I'm serious here, she added, and she was glad that was all it took for him to pay attention. My parents got together during the Third War, did you know? I didn't, he admitted, and she could see it immediately, the way his mind took that and formed the picture Ino wanted to draw for him. It's different. The last few months have been. I know, she told him. But even when you aren't in the middle of it all, you barely act like a person. Sometimes it's almost like you spend time with us because that's what you are supposed to do. Like being here and relaxing is just another mission, something that you have to do. There's so little time, I want to use it as best you can, she finished for him, giving him a sad smile. But that's not how it works, and you know it, don't you? She asked, hating the way he deflated. Then and there, he wasn't Sato, the boy that had already made Jounin and the elemental nations were whispering about, from what she'd picked from her parents. At that moment, he wasn't this legend in the making. Instead, he was just a boy that wanted a second to breathe. What am I supposed to do then? Do what you want, Ino told him simply, giving him a patient smile when he looked about to protest. Spend time with whoever you want. No one is gonna hold it against you if you don't visit us equally. If you want to spend more time training Hinata and Hanabi and it means Shino gets less time, he'll be fine with that. If you want to spend all your days at the vet and that means you barely see the rest of us, we will understand. But nothing, she interrupted, because she couldn't let him spiral away from what she was telling him. We see you, IG, and we know. Maybe not the whole extent of it, but we know you are not fine. It won't make us happier to see you running yourself into the ground to please us. I get it, but He struggled for a moment, before deflating even more. What do I do? He asked, as if she were to have the answers. As it was, she could only push him in the direction she thought was best and hope it'd be the right one. Do whatever you want to do, she told him with a gentle smile. It's that simple, she reassured, drawing a chuckle from him. I remember telling someone something along those lines, so it must be good advice, he commented with a slight grin. How'd we go from dating and being interested in people to this? He wondered out loud, looking like he was half talking to himself. I'm not telling you that you have to start dating or anything, Ino told him seriously. I was just pointing out that it's weird that you've never shown interest of any kind on anyone. I was a little concerned that you were pushing that stuff to the side, which isn't good. But if you are fine, then that's that. I guess I kind of was, he mused, turning around and leaning against the counter to the side, making Ino see mostly his back. I've never been very normal. That's an established fact, yes, Ino agreed, drawing a snort from the boy. It never felt right, to think about that stuff, IG said, looking more like was just thinking out loud, so she decided to keep her mouth shut for the moment. Now, I wonder if that was just me making excuses to myself. If I was doing as you say and pushing it to the side. After that, neither of them said anything. Not long after that, IG started walking around the shop once more and Ino went back to focusing on the counter and some paperwork for the store. She kept her eyes on the boy though. He walked between the shelves, his eyes looked at the plants, his fingers would touch the leaves and petals. But his mind was elsewhere. You here, fearless leader? The redhead of his squad called as she came through the door. Ino groaned out loud. Something the matter, bimbo number 3? She asked, and the Yamanaka for once was more bothered by something else than her stupid nickname for her. IG was having a moment of introspection right then and there. Couldn't she have picked another moment to barge in? Teiya? IG asked, as if he'd barely noticed the redhead's arrival. Yes, everything okay? The girl asked, seemingly noticing that something was going on. No. No, it's fine, the boy answered, slightly subdued as he made his way to the entrance. Kabuto sent you. You were running a little late there, fearless leader, the girl answered instead, which seemed to work just as well for IG. I guess I got a little distracted, he replied with a slight smile. Oh, did I interrupt a date? The redhead asked then, looking amused between IG and Ino. The blonde scoffed, even if she knew Teiya was only joking. Granted, there was a time that such an assumption, even in jest, would have made her happy. A time in which she'd have longed to be with IG like that. She'd moved on though, just as she had moved on from Sajuk. It sucked, but it was what it was. At that moment, her only worry was if IG would be all right. He still seemed more than a little out of it. Nothing like that, the boy waved off easily, before he looked at Ino. Seems like I have to go. Good luck. And remember what we talked about, yeah? She told him. Yeah, I will, IG said, absently as he turned away. Then he stopped, not quite frozen, but as if something had crossed his mind that gave him pause. Hello, everything all right in there? Teiya asked after a moment, waving her hand in front of IG. Ino almost wanted to smack her. Why the boy even put up with her, she'd never understand. Say, Teiya, IG started then, snapping out of his thoughts. Yeah. Do you want to go on a date? He asked directly, bluntly. WHUIWH. The girl immediately started sputtering and Ino could only watch from the side, unable to decide how to feel about what she was witnessing. For one, she was ecstatic that IG had taken her advice to heart and acted on it so fast. For another, she was confused because she was the one he picked. Teiya, the foul-mouthed idiot that seemed to piss off anyone and everyone. Really? Is that a no? IG asked then, revealing nothing at all as he simply looked at the redhead. The only thing Ino could find in his expression was curiosity. I mean, but why? Then, the sputtering ended, as the girl's face turned as red as her hair. She looked half panicked and Ino probably was more amused than she should have been about that. Sure. Great, is tonight okay? IG asked immediately after. Yes. The girl managed to reply, following without even thinking as the boy started making his way out of the store. Once they were out, Ino felt a grin start forming on her face before laughing out loud. Of course IG couldn't go for a semi-decent, somewhat normal date choice. No, the first girl he asked out just had to be a complete disaster. Because really, when had IG Sata ever made any sense, she supposed. I'm sure you would like it, IG commented, pointing at her with his chopsticks, an amused smile on his face as he turned his attention back to his food for a moment. I mean, you like Yuki, don't you? One mutt is enough for me, thank you very much, she replied with a grimace as she looked at her plate. Once more, as she ate, her mind drifted for the smallest bit, wondering why she was in the situation she found herself in. I don't want to be surrounded by the things. If I can stay away from dog tongues for the rest of my life, it won't be long enough, she muttered, making him chuckle. To say that Teiya hadn't expected IG's question was an understatement. Hell, she'd been fairly sure that he was asexual or a romantic or some shit like that. Those kinds of things seemed to barely register in his mind, as far as she'd seen. But then she'd gone looking for him when he was late and that had happened. It's all Bimbo number 3's fault, I'm sure Taeya accused in her mind as she aggressively all but stabbed a bit of food and shoved it in her mouth. Something the matter? IG asked, a corner of his mind pulling up. He'd definitely noticed her slight blush. And now he was making fun of her. God damn it, the day was getting worse and worse. Didn't know you disliked dogs that much, he commented, as if it was really that what had annoyed her, the asshole. Shut up, she grumbled as she continued eating. She was already feeling nervous and self-conscious enough without her face betraying in attempts to turn red. Thank God for the transformation jutsu, because have I said that you look nice? Because you do, he commented, and she felt the heat in her cheeks get worse. I don't remember you being this annoying. She muttered under her breath, as she stuffed more food in her mouth. With some luck, her plate would never be empty, because God, this was all sorts of weird. IG didn't do anything other than chuckle at her embarrassed expression before continuing to eat, the absolute asshole. The illusion doesn't look bad either, he said then, making her freeze, the chopsticks halfway to her mouth. I hadn't considered that. You don't have anything that's not ninja related, right? So what? I didn't expect you to go crazy all of a sudden, she grumbled, her eyes looking anywhere but at him. And I don't know if you noticed, asshole, but I'm not a very girly girl. I don't know about that, IG replied with a half smile. But if you aren't having a terrible time as you seem to be, then we could go shopping next time. Get some clothes that aren't for the job. I certainly need some too, as you can see. Well, that was an accurate statement, Taeya guessed. She was wearing her usual outfit and had slapped a transformation technique over it all to make it seem like she'd actually worn something that looked half decent for an outing. No dress though, because she wouldn't be caught dead in one of those. IG for his part, hadn't even bothered with an illusion, although he at least had a dark red dress shirt instead of a coat or armor or a plain shirt. Awfully presumptuous of you, fearless leader, she mumbled. God, what the hell had happened to her? She wasn't one of those civilian girls that got all flustered when asked out. She was not like that. So why the hell was she sitting there, almost unable to look at him and barely able to speak? Damn it all. So, that's a no? He asked, tilting his head to the side, and Taeya noticed the slight smile he'd worn throughout the whole date was gone for the first time. It had always been there since he'd picked her up from the house she stayed at with Jirobo and Kabuto. Sometimes it grew, sometimes it lessened, but it was always there. Now that it wasn't, it looked all sorts of wrong. He didn't look sad, or angry, or anything. She doubted he'd be, even if she were to go all in with the bitch mode. IG wasn't easily angered, and while lately he'd been more easily annoyed, Taeya was sure he wouldn't react that badly to being rejected. I didn't say that, she mumbled again, hating it. Why couldn't she speak like a fucking normal person all of a sudden? What the hell had he done to her? Great, he replied, beaming at her. So, have you thought about dessert? I'll admit, this place's main dishes are much better than the desserts, but they are not bad, he told her, bringing a hand up to his neck in a nervous gesture. Honestly, Taeya was unlikely to notice. The food had looked great, but she'd barely gotten a slight feeling of the taste. Her mind was much more preoccupied with all sorts of nonsense, which wasn't helped by the fact that she seemed to barely be able to think at all. She gave him her choice, for once not sounding like a shy idiot, Thank God. However, as he called for the waiter and gave him their choices for dessert, she did her best to put her mind to work. The situation made no sense, but it was happening. It was best that she dealt with it. The problem was that she had no idea how to deal with it. She'd certainly been given no training for this kind of thing. Worst of all, there was something that she clashed against every time she tried to process it. Why? She asked, managing miraculously to do so with a normal voice for once. Meanwhile, to his credit, IG didn't ask what she was asking or answer with something stupidly cliché. Taeya had half expected him to say that he liked her ever since he first saw her or something. God, she'd have smacked him for that, consequences be damned. Because I think this can work, he said instead, with a shrug. I mean, you are certainly pretty enough, he added, making Taeya's face burn once more. The bastard had the nerve to laugh at her for that. And adorable, gotta add that to the list. I'm not. Taeya started protesting, before stopping as her voice came more as a shriek instead of something remotely menacing. Fucking damn it, what was happening to her? So, you just want me for my body, huh? Didn't expect that from you, fearless leader, she said instead. Why did it hurt to say that though? Not at all, IG denied instantly, calmly instead of being insulted. There are other things I like about you, you know. I don't know how complimenting it would be to tell you that I like your music. I think it does say something about you though, the way you play, what you play, how you play. Taeya decided, for once, to keep her mouth shut. She wanted to hear this. Believe it or not, your personality is not completely awful either, IG commented, and Taeya had to wonder how that was supposed to be a compliment. True, you are annoying and sometimes I wish you could stay silent. Taeya's eye twitched at that, especially when he grinned at her. But I like that too. The fact that you are always going to be the same. No matter what. If you are in front of a kid, in front of the most dangerous of missing nin, with friends or anywhere, you are always going to be the same, Taeya, he said then, his smile turning slightly sad. I even envy that a bit. I'm always acting differently according to who I am with. And while that's all well and good, it's always tiring. Sometimes I wish I didn't care about that. Now, Taeya found that she couldn't say anything. Not that she knew what she would say anyway. So, those are the highlights, I guess, IG finished with an unsure shrug that looked completely out of place on him. The waiter chose that moment to come back with their dessert. Taeya found the food, once more, extremely interesting. Almost as interesting as the way IG pushed it around a bit, like he was unsure if he would really eat it. I didn't scare you into agreeing, did I? He asked then, out of nowhere. Of course not, Taeya scoffed. She was almost relieved that she could finally go back to feeling somewhat in control. You are one scary fucker, fearless leader, but no way you are scaring me into dating you. Ha, that's neat, then IG replied with a smile. And he left it at that. She'd thought he would return her question of why. Why had she agreed to go out with him then? She'd never tell him, of course. However, she could think it in the privacy of her mind though. About how she admired him and the way he'd risen from being just another orphan with no backing to standing at the top of the world. The way he was helping the team, and her, to reach new heights of their own. It was inspiring, even. Furthermore, there were things related to what he'd said that she appreciated. Music was a big part of who Taeya was, so the fact that he seemed to love her so much was important. There was something great about playing something that meant something for her and knowing that there was someone there loving every second of it. Then there was the way he let her do as she wanted, say what she pleased. Most of the time, at least, but that was more than she'd expected when he recruited her. Much more, honestly. She knew why now, but that did little to diminish her appreciation of the fact. She hummed, halfway through dessert, which had been mostly a silent affair as IG left her to her thoughts. Something that she was grateful for, since her mind seemed to be a complete mess. She'd wanted to say something, although, once she'd opened her mouth, she forgot what exactly that had been. So, do you have a secret sweet tooth? You seem to be enjoying dessert more than the meal. IG asked after a moment of her struggling with her stupid-ass brain to come up with words to spew out. It's not as bad as you said, she answered, looking away from him as she took another piece of the cake she'd chosen and put it in her mouth. It was actually pretty damn good. I know a place with better desserts. We can go there next time, IG commented. And again, Taeya found herself unsure of how she felt. Did she want to go on another date? That one hadn't been awful by any means, but then again, her mind had been barely working through the whole thing. If you want to go out again, that is. Did she? That was the question, right? She had no idea. They'd talked some, on the way to the restaurant, at the restaurant through the meal, and it hadn't been that bad. It was weird though, and she didn't even know how to even begin to process the whole thing. Now though, she had some answers to her questions. She had a better idea of where they were standing, or where IG stood. Her own take on all this was probably the part she was most confused about, but I guess. She started hesitantly, once more acting like a fucking shy idiot. God, she hated that. Why the hell couldn't she stop doing that? I guess we can see if this works, she finished, looking away. Great, he replied, and the smile he gave then seemed to be a lot more meaningful than any she'd seen that night. Yeah, she guessed she could see where things went. It couldn't be that bad. Oh. Naruto Uzumaki. He waited impatiently, sitting at the house's dining table. How did IG manage? He had to wonder to himself. His brother hadn't been one to take many missions when they'd graduated. It had been mostly just training while Naruto went out to do D ranks and later C ranks. The Uzumaki hadn't gotten a taste of what that was like until IG went on the mission in which he got New Ivory. Naruto still didn't have all the details on that, but missions weren't something ninja discussed in depth, really. Secret information and all that, he supposed. It sucked, but it was what it was. Then they'd all been tied with the Chunin exams and then IG seemed to have lost all his time. Naruto barely saw his brother after that. There was always a mission, always a fight, always training to do. He hated it, and he hated that they couldn't even help him train that much. He'd just gotten away from them. IG had always been in a league of his own, at least for almost as long as Naruto had known him. As time passed though, he got further and further away. To the point that the blonde was pretty sure IG would kick his ass even if he had the whole power of the Kyuubi to back him up. As if the fox grumbled inside him. Naruto took it as a personal victory that the chakra beast didn't throw a tantrum at the insult. He stood by what he thought though. The blonde was sure there were few people that could defeat IG now, if at all. He also knew he couldn't really hold it against him that he wasn't around as much as they both wanted. He was doing all that he was to keep Naruto safe. It was more than a little frustrating to be left in Konoha like he was a fragile thing. It felt wrong. But how could he complain when his brother was risking his life at every turn so that he could be safe? What could he do? Run? Escape? Go out to help? No, he couldn't do that. It would throw Iji's efforts into the trash and waste it all. He couldn't do that to his brother. So, much as he hated it, he'd just sit at home and train. That was something he could do to hopefully improve the situation. Maybe if he got strong enough, he'd be able to do something. Iji had that Kumo Jinchuriki with him in his missions, maybe he'd take Naruto with them if he got that strong. Or maybe not, he supposed. Iji was too worried about Naruto to bring him along, the blonde knew. It was. He supposed it should have been frustrating, infuriating even. Instead, it was nice. Naruto didn't know if it was all right for him to feel that, but he liked having someone worry for him. Someone that cared. It was all that he'd wanted for the longest time, and now he had that. He'd had that for years now and he was pretty sure he'd always be grateful for that. Still, he wanted to help. Once more, he did his best to focus on the scrolls in front of him. Iji had asked for help with seals, and Naruto would be damned if he didn't help his brother with the one thing he'd asked for. The thing was tricky, especially because Iji hadn't given Naruto many details about what he actually wanted his seal project to do. He could do something with the information he'd been given though. If only he could just. It's no use, he thought resignedly, his foot tapping impatiently against the floor. If there was something Naruto hated, it was waiting. It just wasn't for him. He had to, he knew, but he didn't have to like it. He still couldn't believe it though. Iji had gone out on a date. Nobody had believed Ino when she told them. Nobody except Shikamaru. The Nara had probably figured it out before Iji himself did, the smug bastard. The worst part was that he'd won the bet they had going, and wouldn't even use some of that money to buy them food as consolation or something. Iji had confirmed it though, and they'd still had a difficult time believing. It was odd to think of Iji dating. Mainly because he'd always seemed so detached from such things. Naruto immediately didn't like how that thought sounded once it crossed his mind. Made it seem like his brother was something other than human. Like he couldn't possibly do something normal. Then again, how normal could he be, if he asked out Teiya of all people? Naruto wondered to himself. It wasn't that he disliked the girl but... well, she wasn't exactly easy to get along with, he'd admit, but that wasn't the problem. She had her moments, scarce as they were, but still. If anyone had told him to guess, he'd never have picked her as Iji's choice for a partner, that's for sure. Then again, he didn't get to see what happened during their missions, so maybe they laid the key to this mystery. Perhaps. It was what it was though, and Naruto couldn't wait to know how it went. Hopefully well. Iji could really use some nice things happening, Naruto knew. The blonde had already known that things were taking a toll on his brother, and had felt powerless to help him. Now though, it was so much worse. He didn't even try to hide how tired he was now, which knowing how Iji was, said plenty by itself. Knowing that he had to go on another mission soon didn't help at all, really. How were they supposed to help him relax when there was already something hanging over his head? Thankfully, Iji himself seemed aware of what was going on and had decided to be the smart guy he was supposed to be and actually try to take some time to rest. With some luck, that would help him. Naruto could only hope. He almost jumped when the door opened. Did you at least wash the dishes before just sitting there waiting? IG asked before even entering the room, and Naruto narrowed his eyes looking around. Were there wires somewhere that he didn't notice? Did you? His brother repeated. Naruto chuckled nervously, very aware of the things he'd just left there in the kitchen. I guessed as much. IG sighed as he entered the dining room. With a quick hand seal, a clone appeared next to him and moved to the other room with a roll of its eyes. Honestly, I would think you'd have gotten better after living alone. Sorry. Naruto tried, getting an unimpressed look from his brother. Then, waving the whole thing off with practiced ease, the blonde focused on the important stuff. How did the date go? He asked, eyes almost shining. It was something, I guess, IG commented, looking unsure, which didn't bode well for things. Suddenly Naruto felt very nervous. If things had gone badly with IG as he'd been lately. It wasn't bad, he added then, probably seeing the blonde's expression, which was very reassuring. But it was weird. Different, I guess. So, not bad? Naruto asked, wanting to make sure and feeling as uncertain as his brother seemed to be. Then again, his first date with Hinata had been pretty nice and he hadn't had any doubts regarding that. He supposed he could get it though. It was a bit weird. It was certainly different from what he'd been used to from friendly meetings and such. No, not at all, IG replied, shaking his head and taking a seat at the table. When he turned towards Naruto he looked relaxed. I had a good time, actually, even if it was a little awkward at times. I forgot about everything else that's going on for a bit, and just for that it was great. It was like I was just a somewhat normal boy on a somewhat normal date. Naruto guessed it made sense for him to put it like that. It couldn't be a completely normal thing with IG involved. Even less when his date was Teiya. Regardless of all that, Naruto was very happy with what he was hearing. A little normality would be good for IG, he was sure. She even agreed to go on a second date, his brother continued, his grin widening the smallest bit. Can you believe it? I thought she'd tell me to get lost for sure. Are you sure that's a good thing? Naruto asked, getting an instantaneous response to his joke in the form of a punch to the shoulder. Ouch, IG could have held back a little more there. Dumbass, he grumbled good-naturedly. Already picking her bad habits. Oh man, we are screwed, Naruto continued, not the least deterred by the threat of physical retribution. You are an idiot, IG said then, chuckling to himself. Then, his smile turned sad. Man, I hate that we'll just go on another mission in a few days. We should probably be training instead of going on dates. But Naruto prompted, smart enough to know that there was more to what IG was saying. But I don't want to, his brother replied, nodding to acknowledge his guess. Everyone's still training, even Teiya will be, outside of our dates. If I manage to get a third, he added, his smirk returning for a brief moment. But I don't want to. I'm tired of all that. I'll do the missions, because I have to. I'll even work on stuff with my clones, because just staying as I am is stupid. But I want to enjoy myself too. I think you once told me that your Nindo was life to the fullest, right? Naruto commented, drawing a bitter smile from IG. I've done a great job of not following that, haven't I? The boy commented, running a hand through his hair. I guess I want to enjoy myself while I can. That sounded entirely too ominous for Naruto's liking, but he didn't think pointing that out was a good idea at the moment. Instead, he hummed and sat there. IG seemed to be in his own head, going through things, and Naruto knew there was one thing he could do for certain. Be there for his brother. I'm not being stupid, am I? As someone that knows what that's like. I don't think so, Naruto answered with a grin before they shared a chuckle. Wanting to live your life isn't a bad thing, IG. Nobody can expect you to work all the time and be fine with it. I'm actually rather happy that you seem to be trying to enjoy yourself lately. Thanks, IG said, sighing as his shoulders relaxed. I think I needed to hear that. Anytime. What are brothers for, right? Naruto asked, one of his hands moving to his chest where he got a hold of the pendant he'd received so long ago. IG, meanwhile, did the same thing with his, and the two looked at their necklaces for a long moment. Did I ever thank you, Naruto? What for? For inviting me to ramen that day, IG said, a smile on his face. You changed my life that day, you know. Things would have been a lot different if you hadn't, I think. And maybe I wouldn't be this deep into this shit, but I like how my life turned out. I love the fact that I have brothers and sisters now. I love our group and what we've built together. I love all this, so thank you for making it possible. You did all this too, IG, you idiot, Naruto replied, his own grin turning watery as he tried his best to keep tears at bay. IG had been the one to change his life too, after all. And he'd never forget that. So, let's just say we are even, yeah. Even if I think you've done much more than me. I guess that's fair. So. Naruto trailed off, his mind working to find something else to talk about, else the two of them start bawling in the dining room. Those clones are cool, he blurted out. Which seemed to throw IG into a laughing fit. Never change, Naruto. Never change. That's it, Sky, for now. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.